The cruise brochure was still sitting on my kitchen counter when my daughter called to tell me I wasn't welcome on the trip I had planned and paid for. I remember the exact moment I picked it up the first time. It was a Tuesday in February, cold enough that I'd turned the heat up twice already, and I was sitting at the dining room table with a cup of chamomile tea going cold beside me. My husband, Reggie, had passed 14 months before, and the house had taken on a particular kind of silence that I hadn't found a name for yet. Not peaceful, not grief exactly, just empty in a way that pressed against my chest every morning when I woke up. I'd found the brochure tucked inside a stack of mail. Caribbean Princess, 7-night cruise, Nassau and Cozumel, and a private island stop somewhere with turquoise water, the color of a dream. Reggie and I had talked about a cruise for years. We were always going to do it next summer, next anniversary after the grandkids were older. We never did. I sat there for a long time looking at those pictures. Then I thought, why not now? Why not me? My name is Nadine Caldwell. I'm foremost a pharmacy technician on a mission in Havantitini, Decatur, Georgia, and I retired 4 years ago with a pension that isn't flashy but is mine. I own my house outright. I have a savings account I built, dollar by dollar, through decades of brown bag lunches and skipped vacations and saying maybe next year so many times that next year became a habit I almost couldn't break. I had 2 daughters. My older one, Shayla, is 41. She married a man named Derek 8 years ago, and they live 40 minutes away in a newer neighborhood with a homeowners association and the yard full of landscaping they pay someone else to maintain. My younger daughter, Bria, is 38, single, still figuring things out the way she always has, and she is the one who would call me just to talk, not because she needed something. The cruise was my idea, my gift, my way of doing something Reggie and I had always postponed, only this time I would do it for my whole family. I wanted a memory. I wanted to sit at dinner on a ship in the middle of the Caribbean and look around at the faces I loved and feel like all those years of careful living had added up to something beautiful. I started planning in March. 7 nights on the Caribbean Princess departing out of Miami. I booked a balcony cabin for myself and a connecting cabin for Shayla, Derek, and their 2 children. My grandsons, Marcus Jr., who everyone calls MJ, and little Drew, who just turned 5. I called Bria and she said yes before I even finished the sentence. I put down deposits on 3 cabins. I started a group text with everyone so we could coordinate flights. I found round-trip tickets from Atlanta to Miami for a reasonable price, and I sent the links to Shayla so she and Derek could book while the fare was still good. She said she would look into it. 2 weeks passed. I asked again. She said they'd been busy. I went ahead and bought their flights myself. 4 tickets, Shayla, Derek, MJ, and little Drew, because the fare was climbing and I didn't want to lose the price. I sent Shayla the confirmation and she texted back a thumbs-up emoji. That was it, just the thumb. I should have paid more attention to that thumb. Over the next few months, I handled everything. I coordinated the shore excursion in Nassau, a snorkeling trip that I knew MJ would love because that boy has been obsessed with sea creatures since he was 3 years old. I booked a catamaran tour in Cozumel. I researched the dining packages and reserved a specialty dinner for the whole group at the steakhouse on board because Reggie always said the best family conversations happened over a good meal, and I believed him. I paid for all of it. Every deposit, every excursion, every dining reservation, all 3 cabins. I kept a spreadsheet on my laptop because I've always been organized like that. 31 years of lesson plans will do that to you. The total came to just over $11,000. $11,000, a number I had saved toward over a lifetime, a number I spent on purpose, freely, because I believed it was going toward something that mattered. I told myself I wasn't keeping score. That's what you tell yourself when you love people. You tell yourself it's not about the money, it's about the time together, it's about the memories. And I meant it. I genuinely meant it. The trip was set for the second week of August, 14 weeks away, when Shayla called me on a Wednesday evening. I was watering my container garden on the back porch. I had tomatoes coming in late that year, and I'd been babying them for weeks. I saw her name on the screen and I answered the way I always did, warm and ready. She didn't say hello the way she usually did. There was a pause, just a beat too long, and then she said, "Mama, I need to talk to you about the cruise." I set down the watering can. She said that she and Derek had been talking. She said that Derek's parents, his mother and father, who live up in Charlotte, had mentioned wanting to come along. She said Derek felt strongly that this would be a good opportunity for his side of the family to spend some real time together, and that since the cabins were already connected, it made more sense logistically if it were just Derek's family in that space. I stood very still on my back porch. I said, "What are you telling me, Shayla?" She said it quickly then, the way people say hard things when they've rehearsed them. She said that Derek's parents would be booking the connecting cabin, and that maybe I could look into booking a different cabin somewhere else on the ship, or if I wanted, I could look at rebooking on a different sailing altogether. I said, "The connecting cabin is in my name." She said she knew that, and she appreciated everything I had done, but Derek felt it was important, and she hoped I would understand. I asked her if Derek's parents were paying for their own cabin. She said they were going to work something out. I asked her if she meant they were going to work something out with my credit card, the one I had on file with the cruise line, for all the reservations. She didn't answer that directly. She said she was sure it would all get sorted, and she hoped I wouldn't make this harder than it needed to be. I told her I needed to think. I hung up the phone and I stood there looking at my tomato plants for a long time. The sun was low and it made everything orange and soft, the way summer evenings do in Georgia, and I thought about Reggie. I thought about how he used to say that you could tell what people really thought of you, not by what they said, but by what they assumed you would accept. I went inside and I opened my laptop. I pulled up the cruise line website and I logged into my account, and I sat there with my reading glasses on, looking at the reservation screen for a long time. 3 cabins, all in my name, all linked to my payment method, flights booked under my name and charged to my card, shore excursions, dining reservations, everything. $11,000 and 4 months of planning, and my daughter had called to tell me that she and her husband would prefer I found somewhere else to be. I clicked on the cabin I had booked for Shayla and Derek and the boys. The cancellation screen asked me, "Are you sure you want to cancel this reservation?" My finger hovered over the trackpad. "Here is what I want you to understand. I am not a dramatic woman. I don't raise my voice. I don't slam doors. I taught second graders for 31 years, and if that teaches you anything, it teaches you how to be calm when everything inside you is not calm at all. I have buried a husband. I have sat in hospital waiting rooms. I have gotten through things by being steady and quiet and moving forward. But sitting at that table, in that house that had been too quiet for 14 months, I felt something shift. Not anger exactly, something older than anger. Something that had been building for a long time and was only now finding its shape. I thought about the thumbs up emoji. I thought about the 2 weeks she didn't book the flights until I did it for her. I thought about Christmas 3 years ago when I drove 40 minutes each way in sleet to watch MJ's school pageant while Derek's parents zoomed in from Charlotte. And afterward, Shayla said, "Wasn't it nice that everyone could be there?" And I smiled and said, "Yes, it was." I thought about the calls I got when something was needed and the calls I didn't get when nothing was needed. I thought about the word appreciate. She had said she appreciated everything I had done. People say that when they want you to know they noticed, but they don't intend to do anything about it. I clicked confirm. Then I went back and I canceled the shore excursions attached to their reservation, the snorkeling, the catamaran, the specialty dinner. I removed the secondary card authorization I had set up on the account. I called the airline and I explained that I needed to cancel 4 of the 8 tickets on my itinerary. Because I had booked them myself under my own account, I had the authority to do it. There was a cancellation fee, but the refund came back to my card. I sat there for a while after that, not feeling triumphant, not feeling sad, just feeling clear. I thought about who I actually wanted to be on a ship in the Caribbean with. I called my friend Octavia. We've known each other since 1987, since we were both young teachers at the same school, and she let me borrow her stapler on my first day, and we ended up talking for 45 minutes in the copy room. She's been widowed too, going on 3 years now. I said, "Octavia, what are you doing the second week of August?" And she said, "Absolutely nothing, and I am furious about it." I called my sister-in-law, June, Reggie's younger sister, who I have stayed close with because she is the kind of woman who calls you on the hard anniversaries without being asked. I asked if she'd ever been on a cruise. She said she had always wanted to go. I told her I had a cabin with a balcony and her name was not on it yet, but it could be. She laughed so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. I called my friend Paulette from church. Not the Paulette in the list, a different woman entirely. My Paulette, who has been suggesting for years that we take a trip together, and I have always said maybe next year. I said it was next year. She said give me 20 minutes and called me back with her credit card number ready. 3 women, 1 cabin with a balcony, Caribbean water the color of a promise. I still had one more thing to handle. Shayla called me 2 days later. Her voice was different this time. Tighter, with something underneath it. She asked me if I had canceled the cabin reservations. I said yes. She said, "What did I mean?" "Yes, how could I do that? Those were their reservations." I said they were my reservations, in my name, on my credit card, and I had every right to manage them as I saw fit. She said this was unbelievable. This was so hurtful. She couldn't believe I would do this to her family. I let her talk. I've learned that sometimes you have to let people say what they're going to say. When she stopped, I said quietly, "Shayla, you called me to tell me I wasn't welcome on a trip I planned and paid for. You told me to find somewhere else to be. I found somewhere else to be." She said it wasn't like that. I said, "I know what it was like. I was there." She said Derek's parents were going to be so disappointed they had already started looking forward to it. I said I was sure they would find another cruise. She said she didn't understand why I was making this into such a big thing. I thought about all the years I had made things small so that she wouldn't have to feel the size of them. I thought about every time I smoothed something over, every time I said it was fine when it wasn't fine, every time I told myself that keeping the peace was the same as having peace. I said, "I love you. I'll always love you. But I'm not going to explain this further." And I hung up. Bria called me that night. She had heard from Shayla. She didn't say much at first, just listened while I told her what had happened. And then she was quiet for a moment and she said, "Mama, I'm proud of you." I hadn't expected those words, and they made my eyes sting. She said, "Can I still come on the cruise?" I laughed. I actually laughed, standing in my kitchen for the first time in a long time. I told her of course she was coming. I told her she was never not coming. The second week of August came around warm and clear. We flew out of Atlanta, the 5 of us, me, Bria, Octavia, June, and Paulette. And when we boarded that ship in Miami and walked out onto the balcony and saw the port below us, the water glittering, the sky already doing something magnificent with the late afternoon light, I put my hand on the railing and I just breathed. Octavia stood beside me and said, "Lorraine, look at this." I said, "I know." Nassau was everything the brochure promised and more. We took a water taxi to Paradise Island and walked on pink sand, and Paulette bought a hat so large the brim kept catching the breeze, and she had to hold it with both hands all afternoon. June got in the water for the first time in years and came out laughing like a girl. Bria snorkeled out past where the rest of us were standing, and when she came back, she was lit up from the inside, the way she used to look when she was 9 years old and had discovered something wonderful. I thought about MJ and how much he would have loved those fish. I thought about that, and I let myself feel it, and then I let it go. In Cozumel, I bought a small piece of amber from a market stand, a golden brown pendant on a thin silver chain, because the woman selling it told me amber was ancient light that had been trapped and preserved for millions of years. And I thought that was a beautiful way to think about something. I put it on right there at the stand, and I wore it for the rest of the trip. The last evening on the ship, after dinner, the 5 of us sat on the balcony as the sun went down. The water was dark and endless, and the sky was going from orange to violet to something there's no real color word for. Somebody had ordered a bottle of champagne, and it was sweating in the ice bucket. We weren't saying anything in particular. We didn't need to. Octavia reached over and patted my hand. I thought about Reggie. I thought about how he would have loved this, how he would have stood at that railing and said something quiet and true, the way he always did. I thought about all the next summers we were going to do this. I thought about how much time I had spent waiting for the right moment, the right company, the right permission. I thought about how the right moment had been there for a long time. I had just needed to stop asking for it and start claiming it. I'd turned 68 on that cruise. I didn't plan it that way. The dates just landed that way. But on the 4th night, in the middle of the Caribbean Sea, my daughter and my closest friends sang to me at a table by a window with the dark water beyond the glass. And Paulette had somehow arranged for the kitchen to send out a small cake with a candle on it. And I sat there in the candlelight, and I felt, for the first time in a long time, fully and completely present in my own life. Not waiting, not giving, not managing. Just there, just mine. There are things I don't know yet. I don't know what becomes of the distance between me and Shayla. I don't know if she has thought about what she asked of me, or if she has decided that I was the one who was unreasonable. I don't know if we find our way back to something honest, or if we stay in this careful, polite in-between for years. I am her mother, and I will always be available to her if she comes to me with something real. But I am done making myself smaller so that she has more room. I am done paying for tables I'm not invited to sit at. I flew home on a Sunday, and when I walked back into my house, it was still quiet, the way it always is, but it felt different. Less like absence. More like space. More like room for whatever comes next. I set my suitcase down in the hallway. I put the amber pendant on the shelf where I can see it from the kitchen table. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea, and I sat down with it while it was still hot. Outside, the late summer Georgia afternoon was cold and heavy, the way it gets in August when the heat has finally done its work and the light goes long and slow toward evening. I had been there before, in that chair, in that light, in that quiet. But I was not the same woman who had sat there in February with a brochure and a grief she hadn't named yet. That woman was waiting to be included. This one had already gone. I keep the amber pendant on the shelf now, where I can see it from the kitchen table every morning. I didn't buy it as a souvenir. I bought it because the woman at the market stand told me it was ancient light. Sunlight that had been trapped inside resin for millions of years, preserved exactly as it was. And I thought, some things hold their light even when they're buried. The question is whether you ever let them out. What happened to me on that cruise wasn't just about a trip. It was about a pattern I had been living inside for so long I had stopped being able to see its edges. I gave because I loved. I planned because I cared. I paid because I wanted everyone around me to have something good. Those aren't bad instincts, But somewhere along the way, I had let those instincts become a kind of permission for the people I loved most, to assume I would always be there, always give, always make myself smaller when the space got crowded. Shayla didn't wake up one day and decide to treat me poorly. It happened gradually, the way these things always do. A thumbs-up emoji instead of a phone call. 2 weeks of silence when a simple yes would have taken 30 seconds. A conversation where she asked me to move aside as though the seat I was in wasn't one I had paid for with my own hands. Each of those moments was small enough to overlook. Together, they told a story I should have read sooner. Here's what I've come to understand. How we treat the people who love us unconditionally is a reflection of our character, not theirs. My daughter is not a cruel woman, but she made cruel choices, and there is a difference between the two, only if you're willing to look at it honestly. I had to be honest enough to see it, and that honesty, that willingness to call a thing what it actually is, even when it hurts, is something I had to build in myself over a long time. It doesn't come easy. It's easier to smooth things over, to tell yourself it wasn't that bad, to protect the peace by pretending the wound isn't there. I spent years doing exactly that. What finally changed wasn't anger, it was clarity. There's a version of self-respect that isn't loud or dramatic. It doesn't slam doors or make speeches. It just quietly stops handing itself over to people who aren't careful with it. That's the kind of strength I found at that kitchen table, looking at a cancellation screen with my reading glasses on and my hands completely still. I didn't feel powerful in that moment. I felt something more durable than power. I felt certain. Octavia held my hand on that balcony in Nassau. June laughed so hard in the water she nearly lost her footing. Bria came back from snorkeling with her whole face lit up the way it used to when she was 9. And I sat in the middle of all of it, not managing it, not funding it, not holding it together, just inside it, belonging to it, present in a way I hadn't let myself be in a very long time. The life I have left is not a consolation prize. It is not the remainder after everyone else has taken what they needed. It is mine, fully and without apology, and I intend to live inside it the way Reggie always said we would, like people who know the value of a day. The pendant catches the light sometimes in the afternoon. I look at it and I think about what it cost me to get to this. I think it was worth every bit.